I remember the lake like it was breathing, the water moving slower than it should, almost deliberate. Fog curled along the edges, thin as smoke, swallowing the old docks in a pale, wavering light. The air tasted of coal pine and something metallic, almost forgotten, at night. The house creaked with its own thoughts, floorboards whispering secrets I didn't want to know. I'd sit by the window, listening to the soft hum of the water lapping, feeling as if the shadows were shifting just beyond my sight. Somewhere in the dark, a single lantern flickered, and I could have sworn it was moving toward me. I'd been told stories about this place, murmurs from neighbors I barely trusted, tales of voices trapped in walls, of reflections that weren't quite mine, of footsteps that followed you in rhythm but not in pattern. And yet, curiosity has a way of drawing you closer, even when your chest tightens and your breath freezes. That night, I walked down the dock, my footsteps quiet against the wet wood, the fog curling around me like a living thing. I didn't notice the water moving against the current, the ripples forming shapes too deliberate to be natural. And then, just as I reached the end, I saw it, or maybe it saw me first. I froze, my heart already hammering, because it was neither shadow nor reflection. It was something waiting. I never should have stepped closer. That's when I saw it. The fog was thick. It pressed against my coat, cold and damp. The lake was quiet, though the air felt heavy, full of waiting. I stepped onto the wooden dock. It creaked beneath my boots, soft, hesitant. Somewhere behind me, the trees shivered. A whisper brushed past my ear. I thought it was the wind. Then it came again. Soft, almost familiar. My own voice, or something pretending to be. The lantern light in the distance flickered. It swayed against the wind, though the night was still. Shadows stretched across the water, twisting with every ripple. The ripples moved like footsteps, following me. I stopped, breathed in the cold air, tasted the lake's salt on my tongue. The whispers grew clearer, closer. I leaned over the edge, trying to find their source. Nothing but fog and water. And then I realized the sound wasn't coming from the lake. It was coming from the house. I walked back toward the shore. Each step felt heavier, my boots sticking to the damp wood. The house stood pale, barely visible through the fog, lantern light dancing along its walls. I paused at the porch. The whispers pulsed through the air, circling, curling around the corners of my mind. They weren't words. Not yet, just a calling, a soft insistence. I touched the door. Cold, the paint flaked under my fingertips, smelling faintly of mold and old smoke. The whispers stopped a moment I made contact. A silence so complete it made my ears ache. Inside, the air was heavier. A faint hum vibrated on the floorboards. I could hear it in my chest, in the back of my throat. It was the house itself, breathing, alive, watching. I moved through the hallway. Shadows lingered under the stairs, stretched toward me like thin fingers. The floorboard sighed under every cautious step. A window rattled. Soft footsteps mirrored mine, just behind, always behind. The whisper returned, low, almost gentle. It wound around the corners, curled beneath the door frames. It sounded like me, or me imagining someone else was me. I reached the kitchen. The lantern from the dock had come inside. Its light flickered on the wall, a pale, wavering hand. The hum rose, a soft vibration through the air. I touched the table. Cold, solid. Nothing moved, but the whispers. They came from the walls now, not from the lake, not from the air, from inside the house itself. Soft, insistent, calling me by name in a way I didn't remember. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. The dark seemed to watch with me, patient. I felt it, waiting, listening. I went to the window. The dock was gone. The lake was gone. Just a pale light swaying where it had been, flickering against the fog. I pressed my hand to glass. It was colder than the night outside. The whisper curled around my fingers, around my wrists. It wasn't a voice anymore. It was a presence. Soft, close, alone. I stepped back. The floorboards groaned. A door creaked in the distance. Not the front door. A bedroom door. Upstairs. I didn't go up. I stayed in the hallway. The hum throbbed through the walls, through me, and then, just for a moment, Everything stopped. The whisper vanished. The hum vanished. Even the fog outside seemed to hold its breath. I was alone, but the house was not, and I knew somehow it never would be. I sat on the stairs, letting the silence settle around me. The fog pressed against the windows. The lantern light flickered, and the whisper began again, soft, patient, calling me home. The lake was quiet. Fog hung low over the water, curling around the wooden posts of the dock. Inside, the lakehouse smelled faintly of damp wood and cold air. I moved slowly down the hall, my feet soft against the creaking floorboards. The lamp in the corner gave off a pale light, enough to see, but not everything. The mirror hung above the dresser. Its glass caught the light differently tonight, softer yet sharper. I stopped. Something shifted behind me, a shadow maybe, or a trick of the dim light. I turned. Nothing, but the reflection, it smiled. Before I even had a chance to, I froze. My breath caught in my chest. I looked again. The room was empty, the chair still, the curtains still, yet the mirror, it whispered something I couldn't hear, something soft, teasing. I stepped closer. The surface was cool under my fingertips. A cold draft brushed my neck. Every glance after that felt wrong. The reflection lagged, ever so slightly just behind me, or ahead. I couldn't tell. I started avoiding mirrors. Every reflective surface in the house became a place of dread. Windows, the fridge door, the tiny bathroom mirror. I would not look. Even the water in my cup felt dangerous, trembling with the promise of a hidden face. But darkness has a way of finding you. The lights went out one night. Just a hum, a soft static in the wires, then nothing. The shadows stretched across the walls like long fingers. I felt it before I saw it. A presence behind me, a pause in the air, a breath that wasn't mine. The reflection waited in the dark. I could see it in the faint moonlight, pale and subtle. Every movement of mine echoed in the glass, but not quite right. A tilt of the head, a curl of the lips, things I hadn't done. Sometimes it seemed patient, almost bored. Other times, hungry. I could never tell which version would appear when I dared to look. I lay awake in the room across from a mirror. The floorboards whispered under my own restless movements. The mirror caught the moonlight again, a slice of pale silver, and for a moment I swore I saw a figure standing behind the glass, looking through me, not at me. I blinked. Gone. Even during the day, shadows seemed to lean closer. The reflection mimicked me perfectly at first. Then it didn't. A twitch, a pause, a smile too slow, too wide. I caught it once in the corner of my eye, brushing past a window, and it felt triumphant. I stopped speaking aloud. Soft footsteps in the hall, even when I was alone, made my chest tighten. I moved furniture just to break the angle of the mirrors. Still, every turn, every corner, it found me. Sometimes I think it waits for me to surrender, to look one last time. And when I do, it is already smiling, before I can even try. I light a candle now, just a small circle of warmth in the dark. The shadows recoil from it slightly, but the glass, it glows faintly, not from the flame. Something else, something watching. I hold my breath and avoid the hall, yet the mirror waits, always waits. I know it follows me when I sleep. I wake with a chill, the bedclothes twisted, the air heavy, as if someone else had lain beside me. I don't dare look. Not yet. The house is quiet again. The fog presses against the windows. The pale moonlight cuts through the curtains. I sense it behind me, always behind. And when I finally turn, it smiles first. The fog came early that evening. It rolled over the water like a pale blanket, swallowing the dock in gray silence. The wood beneath my feet was slick, cold. I could feel the mist clinging to my skin, heavy and damp. My breath came in shallow bursts, foggy in front of me. Each exhale seemed to stretch longer than it should, as if time itself was slowing. And then I heard it, soft at first. A footstep. Another. Deliberate. I stopped moving. The step stopped. I held my breath. The fog pressed against my face, pressing against my chest. And still, nothing moved. A low hum vibrated through the mist. Not music, not wind. It throbbed like a heartbeat. Steady, insistent. I pressed my hand to the railing, with slick and trembling beneath my fingers. Even the water sounded muffled, swallowed in the fog's thick gray walls. I tried to convince myself it was the dock settling, but the steps began again, heavier this time, closer. They circled behind me, or maybe around me. I couldn't tell. My pulse quickened. I wanted to turn, but the fog seemed to hold me in place. Every nerve screamed to run, to move, but my body was slow, uncertain. The hum grew louder. The mist vibrated against my ears, brushing against my skin like soft fingers. And then the lights flickered. First one, then two, the dock's lamps sputtering weakly against the haze. For a heartbeat, I saw them. Figures, pale and fleeting, slipping between the fog and the light. They weren't quite human. Not fully. Edges blurred, movements too smooth, too silent. I blinked and they were gone. Just the fog. Just the dock. Just my own racing breath. But I knew they hadn't left. The steps returned, circling, echoing, teasing. A pause. A shift. A quiet laugh. Or just the wind. I couldn't be sure. The hum matched my heartbeat now. Slow, then fast, then irregular, like something behind me was breathing in time with me. I dared to glance over my shoulder. Nothing, just gray, but the air smelled wrong. Metallic, damp, faintly burned, and cold fingers of fog curled around my ankles. I started walking, careful, slow. Each step met with an echo heavier than my own. Every time I slowed, they slowed. Every time I paused, silence returned. But only for a moment. The dock seemed endless. Light flickered again, revealing shadows that shouldn't exist. Figures merging with mist. Eyes that caught the dim glow, just for a second before vanishing. I swallowed hard. A taste of iron filled my mouth. My hands trembled. The fog whispered against my ears, brushing the back of my neck, soft and deliberate. I couldn't see them fully, couldn't reach them, but I felt them, close, watching, waiting, and then the hum faded. Steps stopped, only my own breathing, ragged in my ears. The fog softened, pulling back just slightly like a sigh. I turned to leave the dock, but the shadows lingered in the corners of my vision, pale and patient. A faint impression of movement, a fleeting touch of something brushing past my shoulder. I told myself it was over, but I knew it wasn't. Not really. The fog swallowed the dock completely again. Silence returned, but the memory of steps, of figures, of that hum, stayed with me, pressing, waiting. I did not look back. I did not stop. And still, I could feel them, just behind me in the fog, moving with me, unseen. The air was thick near the lake. Fog curled over the water, pale and slow. The scent of damp earth clung to my clothes. I saw it then. A lantern, swinging lightly between the trees. Warm light, steady, though nothing else moved. It beckoned, a subtle pull I couldn't resist. Leaves whispered underfoot as I stepped closer. The trees leaned in ways that felt wrong. Branches nodded like hands reaching. I brushed against bark, rough and slick with moisture. A faint laugh, or was it a scream, carried on the breeze. It twisted around me, impossible to place. My skin prickled. The air tasted metallic. I followed the glow. Each step stretched the forest further. Shadows pooled where light couldn't reach. The lantern swung, still steady. Not a flicker, not a pause. It seemed almost alive, waiting for me. Branches snapped softly behind me. I didn't turn. The lantern moved ahead, teasing, swaying. Its light revealed trunks twisted into impossible shapes. Faces, or memories of faces, loomed in the bark. The mist thickened. It clung to my hair, my clothes. A hum rose in silence, low and vibrating in my chest. I could feel it through my fingertips, brushing the trees as I passed. I reached a clearing. The light danced across wet leaves. The ground shimmered with dew or something older. I leaned in closer. The lantern lingered there for a heartbeat, then vanished. Only wet leaves remained, curling at the edges. The forest seemed to exhale, slow and deliberate. I stood frozen, chest tight, breath shallow. A shadow moved, or maybe I imagined it. I couldn't be sure. The air carried that laugh again, distant, playful, or cruel. It wrapped around the trees, drifting past, gone before I could catch it. I felt eyes on me. Not human, not animal. Something patient. Waiting. Every leaf underfoot whispered in reply. I wanted to run, but my feet were heavy, rooted to the soft mud. The lantern's glow had vanished, but the pull remained. I traced where it had been. Fingers brushing cold leaves, fingertips sticky with dew. A faint warmth lingered in the air, as if the light had breathed there moments ago. The wind shifted. It rustled something in the distance. Soft footsteps? Or only the trees sigh among themselves? I moved forward, hesitant, drawn. Every shadow seemed to pulse. Every sound echoed, twisted. The fog curled tighter around my ankles, cold and wet. I paused. The clearing was empty, but I was not alone. Something waited in the stillness, breathing slow and shallow. I never saw the lantern again. Only the wet leaves glimmering faintly in the pale light. Only the hum in my chest that wouldn't fade. Only the sense that eyes, patient, waiting, had followed me from tree to tree. I left the forest quietly, almost slipping back into the fog. The lake lay calm behind me, but the pull, soft and insistent, lingered, like a memory I could not shake. Even now, when the night is still, I feel it, a light swinging just beyond reach. And I hear that laugh or scream, drifting through the trees. The air smelled of damp earth and cold water. Moonlight skated across the lake in pale, trembling streaks. I could see the trees mirror in the surface, but the shapes, they didn't stay still. Ripples twisted. They formed lines that weren't random, almost like letters I couldn't read. Something beneath the surface moved too fast, too deliberate that I knelt at the edge. The mud was soft under my fingers, cool, clinging. The water shimmered, reflecting the moon, but the reflection of the trees bent violently. As if breathing, the shadows shifted behind the silver light. I froze. It was too quick, too smooth for a fish, but too fluid to be air. I leaned closer. The surface trembled against my fingertips. The ripples grew patterns, twisting like faint writing. I wanted to pull my hand back, but curiosity held me. A faint hum rose from the water, almost a whisper, or maybe just the wind. The sound pressed against my ears, gentle yet strange. The shapes moved under the pale reflection, stretching and shrinking. I felt eyes, or something like them, watching from below. The moon caught a branch. It trembled. The reflection fractured. Forms appeared where there should have been only trees. A leaning figure, pale, standing just beyond the surface, blurred by water and moonlight. I blinked, and it was gone. The lake smelled sharp, metallic, like wet iron. My breath stirred the fog, rising off the edges. I felt the dampness in my hair, cold droplets from unseen spray. Each ripple carried a sense of intention, slow, almost patient. I tried to follow a shape just beneath the water. It darted away, faster than my eyes could track. I thought I saw fingers reaching, stretching, but the reflection broke apart. The trees bent in impossible angles, shadows curling inward, almost like the lake itself was folding. I pressed my palm against the surface. It felt smooth and heavy, like glass hiding something alive beneath. Ripples raced from my touch, forming patterns that seemed almost intentional. I wanted to speak, to ask what was there, but my voice had gone soft. A sudden shift. A form rose briefly, silhouetted against the moon, slender, impossibly pale. Then it sank. The lake returned to calm, too calm, the writing on the surface fading into ordinary ripples. Only my trembling hand remained, dripping water onto mud. I stepped back. The fog thickened, curling around my ankles. Silence settled, but it felt expectant, waiting. I wanted to leave, but my feet stayed planted, drawn to the edges where reflection and water blurred. Moonlight flickered through clouds. The lake gleamed pale again, ordinary, and yet I could still feel it watching. Something that shouldn't be there, moving just beneath the surface. I inhaled the cold air. It tasted faintly of iron and moss. A soft, almost inaudible rustle came from behind me. I didn't turn. The reflection shifted once more. Trees bending unnaturally. A pale figure winking in and out of existence. Then the water stilled. Ripples dissolved. Only the quiet hum remained, pressed against my ears, faint but relentless. I backed away slowly. The moonlight lingered on the lake, pale and distorted. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just the water that had watched me. Something had followed the gaze, lingering behind the veil of light. I left with wet shoes and chill fingers. The lake stayed, silent but not empty. Its surface hid more than it reflected, and I knew I would return. The lake was still tonight. Fog drifted over the water, curling like smoke from a forgotten fire. The air smelled of damp wood and pine. Inside the house, the floors groaned under my weight. I hadn't meant to come up here. The hallway felt longer than usual. The attic door was open, a slow, creaking arc like the house had remembered me. I stopped, my breath caught in the quiet. Dust motes floated in the pale light. Trembling, I could see the edge of the floorboards, warped and gray, and something else, something that shifted just beyond sight. I felt a pulse in the air, a subtle vibration like a heartbeat waiting. A soft, almost tender whisper curled around my ear. "Axa?" I froze. The voice was mine, but not mine. It was soft, familiar, pulling me. The door seemed alive, edges trembling, hinges sighing with purpose. I wanted to run, but my feet moved closer anyway. A thin chill brushed my skin, the kind that makes your hair stand on end, even in the heat. I leaned toward the doorway. The attic smelled old, like mothballs, dry leaves, and something metallic. I could see the shadow of something at the far end. It breathed, slow, measured, patient. I took a step in. The floorboards moaned beneath me. Each step seemed louder than the last, echoing in the tight, dusty space. Whispers slithered along the walls. "Come closer." "It's waiting." My hands brushed the trunk, which splintered under my touch. Something hissed. A soft, wet sound from the corner. I could feel its eyes on me. I wanted light. My phone was in my pocket, but I dared not pull it out. The glow would draw it. So I let my eyes adjust. The shadows stretched long, crawling up the slanted roof. The whispers grew, layered, soft, urgent. "Don't leave, stay." I could feel it behind the attic stairs. Just above me, a heat, like someone breathing over my shoulder. I didn't look up. I couldn't. The door had shifted again, closer to me, or I to it. I wasn't sure. The edges seemed to pulse, like the wood itself had veins. I heard a soft thump. The trunk rattled. Dust fell in tiny clouds. I could smell it, old wood, dry and acrid, and something else. Iron, sharp, alive. I wanted to leave. I could feel my pulse in my throat. But my legs, they wouldn't obey. The whispers repeated my name, each one layered over the other. "Axa, Axa, Axa." A movement in the corner. A shadow detached itself from the roof beam. It wasn't a person. Not quite. Just darkness breathing. I held my breath. It moved closer, slower than air, lighter than dust. A soft hum filled the attic. I could feel it in my chest, rising with each heartbeat. The floor beneath me seemed to shiver. I realized I couldn't see the end of the room anymore. The far wall dissolved into shadow, and from it came a whisper I couldn't place. Finally, my hands grazed the edge of the stairs. Cold, smooth, wrong. Something brushed my wrist. Not solid, like silk or smoke. I stepped back. The door swung shut with a whisper of force. I thought it was over, but the hum stayed. The shadow stayed. I turned to run. My foot caught on the rug. A breath of air against my neck froze me. "Stay!" The dust swirled again, eddying around me. Pale light glinted off something in the corner. I couldn't see it clearly. I didn't want to. The door waited, hinges quivering softly. It was silent, but alive. I left the attic, feet trembling on the stairs. The whisper followed me down the hall. "Soon." Now in my room, I can still feel the cold edge of the door. Closed, locked, but alive. I don't think it will wait forever. The house breathed around me. Winter had turned the windows opaque with frost, and the floorboards whispered under my weight. I had always felt it here, quiet, too quiet. But tonight, the air was heavy. A low vibration ran along the walls, beneath my skin, under my ribs. I pressed my palm to the living room wall. It hummed, constant, endless that IT was not the hum of pipes, not the old furnace. It was alive that I leaned closer, ear against cold plaster. A muffled voice, soft and trembling, rose beneath the hum. A cry, barely formed, like someone whispering into wet clay. It twisted, moving along the wall as I shifted. Always just beyond my reach I stood, holding the shiver it left in my chest. Footsteps, or were they mine, echoed lightly across the room. The house seemed to shift in response, a slow, deliberate breathing that pressed against my skin. I moved down the hallway, the hum persistent, vibrating through the soles of my feet. It followed me, changing pitch, whispering in a language I almost understood. Almost. The hallway was narrow, the wallpaper peeled in curling ribbons, faintly smelling of damp and old smoke. Shadows pooled at the corners, thick and heavy. I felt the hum there too, in the shadows, under the peeling paper, rising in pitch. When I slowed my step, I reached the kitchen. The hum vibrated against the sink. I pressed my fingers to the cold metal, and the cries whispered more clearly now. A plea, a warning. I couldn't tell which. The house smelled of old wood and wet stone, of something I couldn't name but recognized deep inside. My chest tightened. I wanted to run, but the hum made my limbs heavy, as though the walls themselves were holding me. I turned. The hum followed, sliding along the plaster, curling around corners like smoke. It was patient. It knew I couldn't escape. I pressed my ear again, closer this time. The muffled voice a child's? A woman's? It didn't matter. It was sorrow, raw and constant, brushing against my thoughts. I touched the wallpaper, tracing the lines with trembling fingers. The vibrations crawled up my arm, into my shoulder, echoing inside my skull. I could feel the house listening, watching, waiting for me to respond. The kitchen light flickered. A soft, pale glow pooled against the countertops. I saw movement in the corner of my eye, but nothing was there. The hum shifted, almost laughing or crying or both. I shivered, tasting the metallic tang of fear at the back of my throat. I walked to the living room again. The hum had grown louder, sharper. The walls fell closer, pressing in. I could almost feel lips against the plaster, breathing, whispering my name in a hollow, distant echo. I pressed my forehead to the wall. The hum vibrated through my skull, through my chest. The whispers merged, incoherent but demanding. The house was alive, and it wanted me to know it. I stepped back. My reflection in the darkened window wavered, pale and trembling. Soft footsteps shuffled behind me. Or was it the hum changing its shape again? I couldn't tell. I sank to the floor. The hum wrapped around me, a living pulse beneath my skin. The house exhaled slowly. I exhaled slowly. The whispers faded, leaving only the low vibration in the walls. It was waiting, always waiting. I touched the wall one last time. The hum slid under my fingers, soft and knowing. The house was patient. So was I, because I could not move. Outside, frost gathered on the windows. The wind whispered against the eaves. Inside, the house listened. And I stayed. The air was thick, damp with the evening chill that pressed against the windows. Outside, the wind stirred the bare branches, scraping them against the siding. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. The floorboards above shifted, soft at first, then heavier, deliberate pacing. A rhythm that wasn't mine, but echoed mine, following me through the empty house. Shadows crawled across the ceiling, stretching, twisting, too long for the shapes that should be there. Every so often, a dark smear would pause, then dissolve as if it had never existed. I tried to ignore it, sipped cold coffee from a chipped mug, but the wooden floorboard spoke louder than anything else. A single step, then a pause. Another step and a drag, then silence, hanging like a held breath. I edged toward the stairs, feet whispering against the carpet. The pacing stopped. I froze, a strange relief mixed with dread. Relief because it was quiet, dread because I knew it was waiting. I climbed one stair. 2. The air changed, denser, heavier, with a faint metallic tang of something old. The footsteps resumed, just above me, slow and now deliberate. I stopped, heart hammering, ears straining against the static hum in my skull. Every time I moved closer, they stopped. Every time I drew back, they started again. It was a cruel rhythm, a silent game I had no rules for. I tried call out. My voice dissolved into the walls. No echo returned, only the dragging, patient way of the steps. Shadows felt differently now. Shapes that should have been corners were round, moving with impossible angles. The ceiling seemed to breathe. A faint groan, like with settling, but sharper, older, resentful. I clutched the banister, cold and splintered under my fingers. I stepped up another stair. The sound ceased. I could almost believe I had imagined it. A sudden creak behind me. I spun. Empty hallway. Yet the air held a faint warmth, a presence lingering like wet wool against my skin. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, except in the spaces between my heartbeat and the slow tick of the wall clock. I tried to listen to anything else. Wind rattling the window latch, leaves scraping across the porch. But the footsteps had carved out their own silence, an emptiness in which I floated untethered. I considered fleeing, but every retreat brought it back. Every approach made it vanish. It was a slow, torturous game, and I was losing. The shadows leaned closer. A corner of the ceiling darkened, then split like oil on water. A shape hovered. I couldn't focus. It was familiar, yet impossibly wrong. I rested my hand on the stair railing. The wood vibrated faintly, as though it had been listening all along. I thought of leaving, of bolting out into the night, but something rooted me in place, something whispering, soft, patient, and inevitable. The steps resumed, slower now, circling. I felt them above, everywhere, as if the house itself had grown teeth and was testing my nerves. I closed my eyes, breathed in the cold, damp air, traced the faint scent of old paper and dust. I moved, a single step, a quiet exhale. The footsteps stopped. I paused, too long, too still. I heard a dragging sound behind me, low and deliberate, closer than I'd ever imagined. I didn't turn, couldn't. The house was alive, and I was merely part of its rhythm. I sank back against the wall, feet drawn up, shadows draped over me. The steps circled, paused, resumed. I realized I could never climb, could never descend. The game would go on. Outside, the wind whispered against the panes. Inside, the floorboard spoke. Above me, the pacing continued. I lay there, trembling, listening. Alone. The kitchen was quiet. The night had settled like dust over the small house. Outside, the wind was soft, almost absent. Inside, the air was still, warm, untouched by the winter that always came this time of year. I noticed the frost first at dawn, a thin, silvery lace curling along the edges of the window. The panes were cold to the touch, though the room stayed temperate. I pressed my palm against the glass. It didn't feel like winter. It felt alive. Shadows moved behind the frost. At first, I thought it was a trick of the morning sun. The light fractured across the ice, shapes forming and dissolving, like smoke caught in a breeze. Then I saw the faces. They were small, pale, pressed close, smiling one moment, frowning the next, as though they were caught in a flicker of thought I could almost touch. I blinked. Gone. Only the frost remained. I leaned closer. Breath fogged the glass, curling over the intricate ice patterns. The figures returned, not in the same place, not in the same shape. Sometimes they reached, their fingers merging with the frost, leaving streaks that glimmered in the muted light. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I stared, the more the shapes felt wrong. They didn't belong. They didn't belong anywhere. A soft hum started in the corners of the room, low, almost like a sigh. I thought it might be the fridge. It wasn't. It was deeper, rising from the walls, or from somewhere just beyond them. The frost thickened. Patterns ran together, branches of silver veins twisting across the glass. The faces became clearer, eyes too dark, mouths too wide. But still, they vanished before I could see them fully. Smiles breaking into frowns, frowns melting into nothing. I touched the glass again. Cold seeped into my fingertips, colder than anything the house should allow. A faint pressure, like a finger pressing from the other side. I recoiled. There was no one there. The kitchen light flickered. Shadows stretched along the walls, elongated and uneven, as if they had a life of their own. I thought I heard footsteps behind me, soft, deliberate, never reaching the floor. I didn't turn. A smell came with it, sharp, metallic, like ice melting over rust. It filled my nose, crawling into my throat. I swallowed hard. The hum grew louder, then stopped. I dared to look again. The frost had shifted, rearranged, as though the glass itself had breathed. Figures pressed closer now. Not full bodies, only glimpses. Eyes, smiles, hands that melted into mist before I could count the fingers. They waited. I felt it before I saw it. A weight, a pull, like the glass was inviting me in. I tried to step back. My feet found nothing solid, nothing to grip. The room felt suspended, as if the walls had grown taller, while I wasn't looking. The shapes smiled. I couldn't tell if they were pleased or warning me. I closed my eyes. The frost, the faces, the pressure, all seemed to seep into my skin, into my chest. A quiet shiver, like tiny footsteps walking across my bones. When I opened them, the figures were gone. Only the frost remained, perfect, untarnished, silent. I touched the glass one last time. The cold was gone. The frost seemed ordinary, fragile. The house felt empty, too empty. But when I looked closer, in the faint reflection of the kitchen light, I saw them. Small smiles pressed against my back. Faint shadows lingering just beyond the edge of sight. They weren't inside the house. Not yet, but they had been waiting. I stepped back. The frost began to fade under the morning sun. I could almost convince myself it had been imagination. Almost. But the weight stayed. The hum stayed. And sometimes when the wind is soft and the house is still, I can feel the pressure on the glass again, like a pale hand pressing, waiting. Alone, I watch the frost. And I wonder what will happen when it returns. The lake was still. A thin mist curled above the water, pale and cold. Twilight had already slipped behind the trees, leaving the world muted, soft-edged. I stood at the bank, boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. A wind brushed against my neck, carrying the smell of wet moss and decay. Then a sound. My name, soft, melodic, almost like it belonged to the fog itself. Anna. I froze. The water's surface shimmered under the fading light, but nothing moved. Still, the voice came again. Anna. Now higher, lighter, coaxing. I took a step back. The mud squished underfoot. My own breath sounded loud in my ears. Don't go. It whispered, silky and smooth, and my chest tightened. I realized it knew me. Each step away was met with another call. Different tone, different rhythm. Teasing, pleading, knowing. It spoke to things I hadn't told anyone. Small, hidden fears, the ones I tried to bury. The fog thickened around my legs. Water lapped gently against the shore, but the voice rose above it. It was not the wind, not the lake. It was something else, something patient. Come closer. A shiver ran down my spine. I could taste the damp air, sharp and metallic, like iron and cold stone. The trees whispered above me, soft, rustling murmurs in time with the voice. I tried to step back again. My boots slid slightly. Something in the mist seemed to side with me. The voice adapted. Anna, you're not safe here, but I can help. A chill dug into my bones. I wanted to run, but the ground felt sticky, resisting. My name drifted from the water in 100 tiny echoes, wrapping around me. It knew my fears, my shame, my guilt, the nights I couldn't sleep, and it spoke to them. I caught a glimpse of movement. Pale ripples danced where the moon barely touched the water. I squinted. A shadow, or my own reflection, fractured by the mist? The voice softened, almost intimate now. Anna, it sounded like someone I had loved, someone who had disappeared. Or perhaps someone I had imagined. I felt the cold seep through my jeans, climbing like thin fingers up my legs. My skin prickled with awareness. I could smell wet reeds, something rotten underneath them, something hidden. And still, the voice persistent. I whispered back, though I didn't want to, leave me alone. The words felt swallowed by the fog. It laughed softly, melodic, echoing in a way that touched my chest. Not yet. The water's edge beckoned. I could see it shimmer, inviting. The fog drifted closer, brushing my arms, wet and cold. My heart hammered. I tried to turn, step away, but the ground betrayed me. Soft footsteps, or echoes of my own, seemed to circle in the mist. And the voice, the voice, knew my next fear before I did. Alone, always alone, it whispered. A promise, not a warning. I didn't move, couldn't move. The water called again, different now, not just my name, but my secrets, my regrets, my loneliness. And I knew that if I stepped closer, it would embrace them all. The lake reflected nothing but the pale smear of moonlight. The mist thickened, pressing against my face, damp and smelling of earth. The voice softened again, almost tender, almost human. Come, it's all right. I shivered, lips dry. The air felt heavy, like the sky itself had leaned down. Everything was waiting, watching, and I realized I could never leave. Not until the voice let me, not until I answered it, in whatever way it demanded. The water moved, a ripple, gentle but deliberate. The fog shifted. I blinked, and it was all around me. The lake, the mist, the whisper, and me, alone at the edge, listening. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Only the voice calling. The room was quiet. Moonlight fell pale and thin across the floor, brushing the edges of my blankets. The window rattled once, softly like a sigh. Shadows stretched across the ceiling. At first, I thought it was just a lamp bending light in the corners. But they moved differently, not with the light, not like a normal shadow. They twisted, curling into shapes I didn't recognize. A hand, maybe, or a face. A blur. They crawled along the ceiling, against the slant of the moonlight, like they were climbing up, reaching for something I could not see. I tried to look away. I told myself it was imagination, tired eyes playing tricks in the dark. But they followed, always there, in the corner of my vision. The hum of the heater seemed louder, vibrating through my chest, or maybe it was the silence of the room pressing in. I pulled the blanket closer, feeling the fabric scratch at my arm. The shadows shifted again. Now they were thinner, stretching toward the corner of the room where the closet door stood slightly ajar. I couldn't tell how many shapes there were. More than one, less than a crowd. Each movement was slow, deliberate, watching. I froze. The floor creaked. Soft footsteps, but no one moved. I held my breath, tasting the stale air. The shadows thinned, merging into the ceiling like smoke. Then one, just one, twisted downward, curling toward the edge of my bed. I blinked. Nothing. Only the moonlight and the pale, shifting ceiling above me. I pressed my hand to my chest. Heartbeat. Loud. Too loud. The shadows returned. They danced along the plaster, bending around the light in ways that didn't make sense. I could feel them staring. A cold brush of air grazed my neck. I thought I heard whispering, or maybe it was the static in my own ears. A pale line of shadow reached for the wall, stretching, folding, doubling over itself. I wanted to look away, but my eyes were stuck. They moved as I moved, but not like they should, not bound by gravity, not limited by corners. I touched the wall. Smooth, cold, solid. The shadows didn't care. They slipped over it, climbing, twisting, folding into forms that reminded me of things I didn't want to name. I shut my eyes. Darkness. But even then, behind my eyelids, they were there. Flickers of gray, curling, coiling. The room smelled of dust and something sharper. Iron. I wanted to breathe, but the air felt thick, heavy, as if the shadows themselves were pressing down. I dared a glance. One shadow had reached the far corner, stretched thin, a finger-like wisp hovering. I blinked again. It was gone. The rest of the shapes clung to the ceiling, pale and shifting. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they began to recede, sliding back, folding into themselves, dissolving into the corners where light did not touch. The bed sagged beneath me. I pulled the blanket over my head. The room exhaled. The silence returned. Only the moonlight remained, thin and patient, brushing the floor in quiet streaks. I did not sleep. I did not dare. But the shadows had not left. They were waiting. Above, always above. The air was cold, almost damp, clinging to my skin. The wooden dock groaned under my weight as I pushed the rowboat into the water. Fog rolled across the lake, slow and thick, curling around the oars. The moon hung pale above, its reflection trembling in the water. Every ripple seemed heavier than usual, as if the lake itself were breathing. I dipped an oar, and the water hissed softly around it. A shape shimmered beneath the boat. I froze. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. The fog swallowed the shore. No sound came from the trees, only the lapping of water and a faint whisper, curling over the surface like smoke. I thought it was the wind at first, but the words, they were too deliberate, too close. The boat shifted beneath me. Something brushed along its side, soft, almost a finger tracing the wood. I held my breath. It did not continue. The reflection of the moon quivered on the water. I could see shapes forming in the fog, ripples stretching into long, spindly arms, reaching out and vanishing again. I wanted to row back, but the oars felt heavy, almost glued to my hands. A hush fell. The whispers returned, clearer now, almost a chorus. I could not tell if they were behind me, or in the water, or inside my head. The air smelled of wet earth and something metallic. My fingers pressed against the oar and I shivered. The fog thickened, so dense it pressed against my cheeks, my eyes. The world had narrowed to the boat, the moon, and the silent ripples moving underneath. Another brush against the side, this time colder, deliberate, lingering. I dared not move. The boat rocked slightly, though no wind stirred. A shadow flickered across the water. It twisted under the moonlight, long and formless. I could hear water sliding along the hull, but it was not water making the sound. Something beneath me shifted, slow, patient. The whispers softened, almost gentle now. I could feel them sliding along my skin, brushing my neck, my arms, as though the fog itself had voice. I wanted to speak, to call out, but my throat had gone hollow. A faint light appeared far off, pale and wavering. Not the moon, but something else, something distant, inviting, almost warm. The fog tugged at the edges of my mind. I could not tell where I ended and where the water began. Ripples stretched upward like reaching fingers, curling around the boat. The brushing returned, lighter now, almost teasing. I let the oars fall, one into the water, one onto the floor of the boat. The boat floated. The fog embraced me. The pale reflection of the moon seemed to tilt just slightly, as if bowing down into the water. I closed my eyes. The whispers receded. The cold faded just a fraction, leaving only the soft brush of fog on my skin. When I opened my eyes, the shapes were gone. The lake was smooth. The boat floated. The pale moon hung above. But I knew it had not ended. The fog had simply learned patience. And so had I. The basement door was cold under my fingers. A draft rose from the gap beneath it, carrying a damp, musty smell. I hesitated, listening. The steps creaked as I descended. Each one echoed, stretching farther than the concrete should allow. I paused. A breath, not mine, seemed to follow mine. The boxes along the wall shifted, just slightly. A corner lifted, then settled again. Shadows stretched and folded, flickering as though they had their own rhythm. I leaned closer to the railing. The air was heavier than it should be. It pressed against my skin, warm and electric. I could feel in my chest a pulse that was not mine. Something brushed past the edge of my vision. A blur, quick, almost imagined. And yet, the rustling followed me down each step. A whisper lingered beneath the hum of the old pipes. I reached the bottom. Concrete smelled of mildew and dust. The hum grew, low and vibrating, seeping into my bones. It wasn't just the basement. It was in the walls, the floor, the air itself. Boxes rattled again. A handprint seemed to appear on the lid of one, pale and wet. I could see it, but the skin underneath did not look like mine. I wanted to step back, but my feet held to the concrete. The hum pulsed with each breath I took. I realized the sound wasn't uniform. There were layers, Deep notes, high whispering threads. They carried names. Mine and others I couldn't remember. A shadow slid along the far wall. I froze. It didn't walk. It drifted, as if the air itself was bending around it. I could feel its gaze, though there was no face. The boxes trembled again. Dust rose like smoke, tasting of iron and old wood. Something breathed close behind me, warm and damp. I dared not turn. A light flickered near the corner. Dim, pale, almost reluctant. It revealed a small door I had never noticed before. Whispers seemed to leak from its cracks. I knew I should leave. Yet the hum drew me forward. The air thickened. It was sticky, clinging to skin and clothes. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and unsure, mingling with others, slower, older, anxious. The whispering circled me now, soft but insistent. I reached out to the small door. It was colder than the basement, almost biting. The hinges whispered when I nudged it. Inside, I felt the pulse of the hum grow sharper. It was waiting, watching. A box toppled over near my foot. I flinched, but no one was there. The shadows flickered again, folding into corners that should not exist. I stepped back, and the hum softened, like it was aware of my retreat. The air cleared slightly, yet the whispers lingered, soft, breath-like, just beyond comprehension. I could feel eyes pressing to the darkness, unmoving yet alive. The basement was quiet, but not empty. I climbed back slowly, each step echoing differently this time. Something followed, something unseen, brushing against the soles of my shoes. I didn't look back. The hum faded as I reached the top. The door closed behind me with a dull thud. Silence. Only the lingering weight of unseen breaths remained, and the feeling that some part of the basement had followed me up. The lake was still that morning. A pale mist hugged the shore. I could see the chairs lying along the deck, waiting. One of them, the wooden one near the sliding door, felt off. I swore it hadn't been angled like that yesterday. Its legs dug unevenly into the planks, as if leaning toward me. I reached for it. My fingers brushed the cool varnish. Then I turned away for a moment, and when I looked back, it was gone. I froze. The air felt heavier. The fog pressed against the glass. Then a shift in the corner of the room caught my eye. The chair had returned, soaked in the fog now, dripping onto the hardwood floor. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. The faint hum of the lake through the walls made my chest tighten. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the morning light. Still, when I moved to set it right, it felt deliberate, not careless, not random. By evening, other things began to move. Small at first, coasters slid, a lamp tilted slightly. I found a book on the floor that had been on the shelf, its spine wet, the pages curling with damp. I tried to track it, silently, watching the corners of my eyes. Each time I looked directly, the object seemed frozen in place. But the moment I turned my attention elsewhere, a gentle nudge, a playful rearrangement. The lakehouse itself became alive. A floorboard groaned as if sighing. Curtains twitched, catching air I couldn't feel. The fog seeped into the room, curling around the furniture, clinging to the walls. I stayed awake most nights. A chair would vanish again, leaving only a faint wet imprint on the floor, then reappear in a corner, soaking the silence with dampness and shadow. I would reach toward it, feeling the chill in my fingers, but it always felt slightly out of reach. Once, I thought I saw it move on its own, slow, deliberate, sliding across the deck as if following the rhythm of my pulse. I didn't move. I didn't breathe too loudly. I could feel the fog brushing my ankles through the cracks of the door. I started noticing patterns. The objects weren't random. Books, chairs, a small vase on the mantel. They shifted with intent, as if aware I was watching, testing me. Sometimes the movements were playful. The teacup I had left on the table would face toward me the next morning. The coasters lined themselves neatly. Other times, it was cold. The darkness stretched longer into the rooms, the fog clinging to my legs, a hum vibrating low through the floor. I stopped trusting my senses. I couldn't tell if the chair had disappeared, or if I had looked away too long. I couldn't tell if the movement was mine or something else's. The stillness of the lake became a mirror for quiet chaos inside the house. I moved slowly, stepping over rugs dampened with condensation. The fog had invaded everything: corners, ceilings, the spaces between walls. I felt watched, but when I turned, there was only silence, only shadows, only the pale light struggling through the mist. One night, I sat by the window. The chair in the corner, the one that vanished and returned, seemed to stare back. I could feel its gaze, heavy and patient. The fog swirled around it like smoke in a lantern. I whispered my own name, and the room echoed it back softly, a thin, wet sound that seemed to follow me from wall to wall. A hum joined it, faint, almost shy but insistent. Objects shifted again. The chair tilted slightly toward me. The vase trembled. The lamp swung just enough to catch the reflection of the fog window. I realized then I wasn't alone, not in a way I could see. By morning, the lake was calm. The chair sat in its corner, silent. Dry this time, almost innocent. Other objects had returned to their places. I traced their positions with my eyes. All as they should be, all waiting. But I knew they wouldn't stay. Not for long. Not until I stopped looking. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, I swear I hear a soft creak behind me. A chair nudging itself just slightly closer. A test, a greeting, a secret I am not yet meant to understand. The fog drifts in again tonight. And I wait. The chair is there. But for how long? The lake was quiet. A pale mist drifted across its surface, curling in slow, lazy spirals. The night air smelled of damp earth and cold water. I leaned against a railing, feeling the chill seep through my jacket. Fog swallowed the trees along the shore. It moved like it had a mind of its own. At first, I thought it was just the shapes of the fog. But then a face appeared, half-formed, pale, with lips stretched in a faint, knowing smile. I blinked, hoping it would vanish. But it didn't. Another face surfaced. This one twisted, eyes wide, screaming in silence. I could almost hear it, a soft unpressing against my ears. Though no one was there, the water lapped quietly at the shore. I pressed my hands together to keep them warm. The fog seemed to curl around me, soft yet insistent. I turned my head. A dozen faces floated just beyond the reeds. Some watched me with curiosity, like children observing a stranger. Some were angry, mouths opening and closing, trying to form words I could not hear. The smell changed then. Wet stone and something metallic, like rust. I swallowed, but the taste lingered, heavy at the back of my throat. One face drifted closer, its features sharper now, eyes hollow yet full of something. A warning, maybe, or a plea. I wanted to step back. I wanted to run. But my feet were rooted to the damp grass. The fog thickened, hiding the lake entirely. I felt it brush my skin. Cold fingers, gentle but certain. It circled my ankles, climbed my arms. A whisper grazed my ear. Or maybe it was the wind. I couldn't tell. Faces pressed from all sides, pale light forming around their outlines. Some were smiling, soft and calm. Others were contorted, screaming silently. All of them watching. I thought of closing my eyes. Maybe then it would stop. But when I did, the darkness felt heavier, pressing, almost alive. One face lingered longer than the rest. Its gaze was fixed on me. Not angry, not smiling. Just waiting. I heard a rustle behind me. A branch scraping against another branch. Or maybe fingers. The sound was delicate, careful, as if it didn't want to wake the night. I exhaled slowly. The fog shifted, folding over itself. The faces melted into it, leaving only pale swirls behind. Silence settled. The lake reflected the moon, sharp and white. Everything was still, but I could feel them. Watching, always watching. I stepped back from the railing. My shoes squished against the wet earth, and in the corner of my eye, a shadow moved differently than the fog. The lake breathed and missed again. Faces formed and vanished, teasing, warning. I kept walking along the path, feeling their eyes linger, pressing through the fog, soft and cold against my skin. And as I left the shore, I knew they weren't gone. They were just waiting, in the folds of fog, for anyone who stayed too long. The woods were quiet tonight, A pale fog clung to the trunks, curling around the roots like smoke. I felt the damp earth under my shoes, soft and sucking. And then I saw it, a lantern, swinging gently between the trees, closer than before. Its light was thin, almost fragile, but it made shadows stretch like long fingers across the ground. I hesitated, breath catching in my chest. The air smelled of wet leaves and something older lingering in the dark. I moved forward. The lantern seemed to drift, not on a wind, but on its own will. Each step I took, the light pulsed, soft, then sharp, like a heartbeat I could feel in my ribs. The shadows behind it warped strangely. Branches bent without wind. A shape lingered just beyond the glow, too dark to see clearly. I blinked, and it seemed closer. I whispered, though no one could hear me. "Who's there?" Only silence replied. The fog thickened. My shoes sank into the mud. The lantern shifted again. It floated toward the water. I followed, boots wet, pants damp, heart louder than the quiet. Each footfall felt swallowed by the earth. By the shore, the light wavered. It hovered just above the dark water, casting long reflections that twisted beneath the surface. I crouched. My hand skimmed the cold edge of the river. Something glimmered below the surface. A flash of pale orange, as if the lantern itself was reaching downward. I leaned closer, pulse hammering. The reflection shimmered, then vanished. I stood frozen. The lantern had disappeared, but the water still whispered. Not words, exactly, just a pull, gentle, insistent, like the tide drawing me in. I felt the air change, a hum beneath the hum of the night, a subtle vibration in my bones, soft, almost patient. I wanted to step back, but my feet did not obey. Something beneath the surface glinted again, small and deliberate, as if warning me not to turn away. The shadows were still there, lingering between the trees. Not solid, not empty. Something else. My skin prickled where the fog kissed my neck. I crouched lower, breath shallow, eyes tracing the faint ripples. The lantern had not moved. Or perhaps it had, and I was too slow to see. I reached out, hand hovering over the water. The glimmer pulsed once, then vanished. Cold seeped into my fingers, though they had not touched anything. I pulled my hand back, and the silence seemed heavier, thicker, almost listening. The forest shifted. A branch rustled above. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. I wanted to call out to move, but a dread rooted me in place. The lantern returned. Just for a second, a faint glow on the water's surface, reflected in my own wide eyes. Then nothing. The fog closing around me. The water lay still, smooth and unreadable. I knew, somehow, I was not supposed to leave. I turned back toward the trees. The path home felt strange, longer, darker. I could hear my own heartbeat and the soft hum beneath the night. The lantern was gone, but the pull remained, and I could feel it, always there, somewhere in the fog, waiting. The pine trees stood tall, dark against the pale light of early evening. Their needles whispered without wind. A faint scratch, branches against the house, reached my ears. I stepped outside. The air was cold, sharp, smelling faintly of damp earth. Each step sank into the soft pine litter, and the rustling paused. A hollow quiet waited, as if the forest was deciding whether to let me return. I moved slowly. Shadows stretched long across the clearing. Every time I lifted my foot, the rustling began again, soft, deliberate, circling me. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't birds. It was something listening. A branch brushed my arm. Rough, cold, the smell of sap filling my nostrils. I froze. The rustling stopped, then resumed, further away, retreating but always circling. I wanted to call out, but the words wouldn't leave my throat. Silence pressed around me. The pines shifted, like a tide moving just beyond comprehension. I felt it, watching, waiting. The ground underfoot was uneven, and I stumbled over a root. The sound of my fall seemed to echo, but not quite in the way I expected. A rustle answered, near, then farther, then near again. I dared not look behind me. Or maybe I did, just enough to see shadows twist among the trunks. Thin, elongated, almost human. I could hear the faint scratching of needles against bark. The forest smelled different here. A bit like smoke, a bit like wet leaves, and something else iron, faint and sharp. I ran my hand along a pine, feeling the rough bark bite into my palm. Every touch made the rustling hesitate. I tried to take a breath. It felt wrong to breathe. The air was thick, pressing into my chest. The shadows leaned closer, brushing against each other with a soft, almost liquid sound. I wanted to leave. I stepped backward, crunching the litter. The rustling moved with me, never more than a step away. It circled, patient, knowing I couldn't escape its attention. A soft breeze finally stirred, but the pines barely swayed. The rustling persisted, now more like a murmur under the wind. Every step forward was mirrored by the sound behind me. I felt the forest holding its breath, and I felt mine trembling in response. I stopped. The forest fell into a tense quiet. Only my own pulse, heavy in my ears, disturbed the stillness. I could see pale light through the branches, thin and distant. The shadows seemed to stretch toward it, reaching but unable. The wind died. The rustling stopped. I was alone, or maybe not. I stepped toward the house. Each step was measured, careful. Branches brushed the siding, light as whispers. The door was just ahead. I reached for the handle. A single rustle, then silence. I didn't look back. The forest stayed still. I entered the house. The door clicked shut behind me. The pines whispered again, far away, but I was inside. For now. The morning was pale, the air damp with fog that curled around the trees like smoke. The path I had walked yesterday, it was gone. I stepped forward, thinking the forest had only shifted in memory, but the earth beneath my boots felt unfamiliar. Branches whispered against each other, brushing my arms, leaving cold streaks. A hollow hum lingered in the distance, or maybe it was only in my head. I tried to follow yesterday's footprints, but they dissolved into the moss. Every step I took, the trees leaned differently. Shadows twisted in ways that made the light hesitate. The fog thickened, settling into the hollows, hiding familiar shapes. I called out once. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the silence that returned almost immediately. I reached a clearing. I thought I remembered. It was nothing like before. The stones, pale and slick, seemed to pulse beneath the mist. A branch snapped somewhere far, but not too far, like a soft warning. I tried to turn back. The way I had come vanished. Where I expected open air, there was only more trunks, more fog. I moved slowly, tracing vague impressions of a trail. The leaves underfoot whispered with every hesitant step. I imagined I could feel eyes on my back. The forest breathed differently now. Rustling leaves became a rhythm, slow and deliberate, marking my isolation. I stumbled into a depression in the ground, wet earth clinging to my fingers. It was as if the forest had shifted while I blinked. A faint shimmer of light caught my eye. I approached, thinking it might guide me, but it was only the reflection of mist on a leaf, trembling with every breath of wind. I felt my pulse echoing in my ears, loud enough to drown the hum of the trees. I tried to remember landmarks, shapes I had noticed yesterday. A hollow tree, a boulder. Each one rearranged itself when I looked directly at it. I would glance away, and when I returned, nothing was the same. Silence swallowed the world. Even the wind seemed to hesitate before brushing past me. I paused. The fog pressed closer, and the smell of damp earth and decay filled my lungs. Something shifted behind me. I froze. A shadow moved, too smooth to be the branches. I held my breath. It did not move again, but I could feel its presence, patient and watching it. I tried walking in a straight line. The forest tilted with me, or maybe I was tilting, and the path beneath me curved impossibly. Leaves tangled around my legs, slowing me down, though the trees themselves seemed to guide my stumbling deeper. Time felt thick. Minutes became hours, or maybe seconds stretched endlessly. I was lost inside something that resembled a forest, but was not the one I knew. Every instinct told me to stop, but standing still made the hum in the fog rise. I tripped over a root and fell against damp moss. Cold pressed into my palms. When I stood again, the trail I had fallen upon looked familiar. For a heartbeat, hope flared. Then it vanished. The trees shifted again. Shadows leaned toward me. Mist curled around my ankles, pulling me into a rhythm I could not resist. I walked, and the forest walked with me. Eventually, I slowed. The fog thinned slightly, but only enough to show more trees, more emptiness. I realized there was no path, only this rearranging, breathing thing. I paused in the clearing I did not recognize. My chest rose and fell in time with the hum of the forest. Somewhere, far above, a pale light trembled to the branches. I watched it flicker, unsure if it wanted to lead me, or if it was simply another trick. The fog swallowed me, and I walked. The path to the lake was quiet. Mist hung low over the trees, curling around the trunks like smoke. My boots pressed into damp earth, soft and yielding, leaving pale imprints. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves, and something older, like the memory of rain from years ago. I stopped at the edge. Mirror Lake. The water should have been dark, reflective of the twilight sky. But it wasn't. It looked back at me. Faces floated just beneath the surface. Not strangers, but fragments I remembered. A laugh I thought I'd forgotten. A shadow that once lingered in the corner of my childhood room. A hand, pale, reaching, but not mine. I crouched closer. The ripples started slow, deliberate. Each one formed shapes that mimicked me. My head tilted, my fingers brushing the water, but never exactly. A smile twisted wrong. A blink that didn't match mine. My reflection, and yet not. I wanted to step back, but something pulled me forward. The lake whispered without sound. I could feel it in the tremor beneath my feet. I could feel it in the soft brush of wind that carried the echo of footsteps behind me. Though I was alone, I lifted my hand. The water shivered, bending and stretching, trying to meet it, but it always missed. I laughed softly, more nervous than amused. A memory rose. A day in summer, when the sun hit my bedroom window just so, and I thought I was invisible. A shadow pressed itself against the glass. Patient, waiting. The lake held it all. Every joy I couldn't name. Every regret I tucked into the corners of my mind. The ripples spread, reaching for the trees, and I saw them move too. The birches on the far bank bent ever so slightly, though no wind touched them. A rustling faint, like fabric brushing against skin. I blinked and a face surfaced. Mine, but hollowed and older. Eyes that knew things I didn't yet remember. I shivered. The water's edge felt cold against my palms. Icy, almost biting. And still, the lake watched me. A branch snapped somewhere behind me. I turned. Nothing, only the mist, curling in lazy spirals, carrying the scent of damp moss and something else. Something metallic. The ripples changed again. They started small, like the heartbeat of the lake itself, then grew sharper, angrier. Each wave mirrored a movement of mine. A blink, a shift of weight, but stretched it, slowed it, made it strange. I realized I was holding my breath, and the lake was breathing with me. The world around me seemed quieter. Even the birds in the distance were still. Even the wind had gone soft. I knelt closer now. I could see everything. The fragments, the echoes, the shapes of people I loved, people I lost, faces I tried to forget. They swam beneath the surface, fragile and trembling. And I knew, the lake knew me, not just my face, not just my name, but the small moments, the fleeting thoughts, the silences I carried. I whispered to it. Nothing came back, but it responded anyway. The water shifted one last time. It formed a hand, open, waiting. I didn't reach. I didn't move. I just watched. The ripples stilled. The faces faded. The lake became a mirror again. Or maybe it never had been anything else. The mist began to lift. The night pressed down softer now, almost gentle. I felt a brush of cool air against my cheek, a soft exhale, like the lake itself breathing out. I stood slowly, leaving my fingers just above the surface. The water remained calm, but I knew it remembered, and so did I. I walked back along the path, boots sinking into the damp earth. The trees whispered behind me. I did not look back. Yet, in the stillness of my mind, the lake followed. Always, the hallway was empty. The air smelled faintly of wet wood and cold stone. Autumn light spilled pale through the windows, fading too quickly. I had passed this stretch of the lake house 100 times. Every door, every shadow familiar. But today, something shifted. A door was there, not just a memory or a trick of light. It leaned in the hallway where nothing had ever been, though it looked old, older than anything else in the house. Its surface was smooth, but the grain whispered beneath my fingers. I hadn't touched it yet, but I felt the pull. I pressed my palm against the door. It was warm, soft, almost breathing under my hand. A faint hum brushed my ears. Low, persistent. I leaned closer, and the edges of the hallway seemed to melt into silence. I should have stepped back. I should have ignored it. But curiosity has its claws. The door opened without a sound. A pale light spilled into the hallway, thin and trembling. I could see shapes shifting inside, but they weren't shapes I recognized. They moved softly, as if afraid to wake the air. I stepped through. The floorboards beneath my feet hummed, with a gentle vibration. The light was warmer here, brushing my skin like whispers I couldn't catch. I smelled something faint, wax, linen, and something else, something I couldn't name. The door vanished. Just like that. One moment it was there. The next, nothing. Darkness pressing behind me. No hallway. No pale wood. Only the room breathing around me. The whispers grew louder, closer. Yet they did not speak. They weren't words. They were breaths. Soft footsteps brushing against the edge of my hearing. I reached out. The air felt like silk, cool and thick and impossibly deep. Something brushed my fingers. Just a shadow. Maybe, maybe not. I walked slowly. Each step echoed, but not in the way sound usually does. It was absorbed, swallowed by the room. The walls glimmered pale and translucent. They breathed with light, tiny pulses that left me dizzy. I wanted to touch them, to feel their shape. But the whispers tangled around my wrists, gentle, insistent. I tried to call out. My voice caught. The room swallowed it whole. Only my heartbeat remained loud, uneven, and exposed. A figure or a shape flickered at the corner of my vision. It didn't step closer, didn't move like a person. It just waited, patient, silent. I wanted to leave. I turned. Nothing. The door had not returned. Just shadows, soft light, and whispers that circled like smoke. I pressed my back to the wall, try and feel the edges of the room. They shifted. Every step forward felt endless. The floor seemed to pull me inward, deeper into the pale glow. Time stretched. Minutes. Hours. I could not tell. Every whisper carried memories that weren't mine. Soft echoes of laughter, crying, breathing, forgotten, and yet familiar. My hands brushed against the table. Old, wooden, carved with shapes that didn't exist in this world. I could feel the grain under my skin, rough and alive. Something moved under it. Beneath it, within it, I stepped back. A cold draft circled my ankles. The whispers surged. Closer, almost speaking. I closed my eyes, breathed in the room, the hum, the soft chaos of the light. Tried to remember the hallway, the lake house, the safe, solid walls of known. And then, as if the room sighed, the air shifted. The pale light dimmed, retreated. The whispers thinned, drifting like smoke into cracks I could not see. I opened my eyes. The room was empty, silent, and yet the warmth lingered. The shadows lingered. The memory of hands and whispers and a door that was never there lingered. I stood, trembling. The air smelled faintly of wetwood again. Autumn light, fading. And I knew I could never be sure if I had left the room or if the room had left me. The hallway smelled of dry plaster and old dust. Morning light filtered weakly through the thin curtains, pale and trembling. I could feel the floorboards shift under my weight, though no one else was here. The walls breathed. At first, I thought it was the wind, but there was no wind. A soft pulse ran along the plaster, like the house was exhaling slowly, then drawing in tighter around me. I pressed my palm against the wall. It moved, a millimeter at first, then a tremor that traveled up my arm. Dust stirred at the seams, floating like tiny ghosts. I stepped back. The shadows around the baseboard seemed to swell with each inhale. They throbbed softly in time with the walls, and I felt them watching from every corner. A draft whispered through the doorway. Though the window was shut, it carried the faint metallic tang of something old, like rust underwater. The hallway stretched just slightly, then shrank. I blinked. It shifted again, expanding slowly around my ankles, a slow, deliberate pulse. I tried to ignore it. I counted the cracks in the plaster, but the lines moved subtly, almost as if drawing themselves differently each time I looked. Even the ceiling seemed to ripple, soft footsteps echoing in the distance, though no feet had passed. I breathed carefully. Too loud, maybe. The house seemed to hush itself at the sound, like it was holding its own breath. I leaned closer to a corner. The shadows quivered. They weren't quite mine. They didn't match the angle of light. Something inside the wall twisted, thin and restless. A thin stream of sunlight touched the floor. It trembled. Dust rose and fell in rhythm, small clouds beating like lungs. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though nothing burned. I moved forward. The walls pulled slightly as I passed, contracting around my shoulders, soft and gentle. I could almost feel the texture of skin beneath the plaster. It exhaled against me, cold and sticky. The hallway seemed endless now. Every step echoed twice, then thrice, as if the house was counting my movements, memorizing them, learning them. I paused near the staircase. The wooden railing hummed under my fingers, a low vibration that resonated through my bones. And the walls, they throbbed back, a slow, quiet rhythm, like a heartbeat I wasn't sure belonged to me. I crouched. Even the dust settled differently here, circling my knees in little eddies, as though it knew I was trying to hide. The shadows above me quivered again, stretching toward the ceiling, then retracting as the walls inhaled. A soft crack echoed behind me, not from wood, not from plaster. Something shifting deeper in the frame of the house. I didn't look. I didn't want to see. I only listened. Each breath I took seemed to mingle with the house's own rhythm, shallow and uneven now, fear pressing softly against my ribs. The pulse of walls became louder, and I realized it was impossible to separate my own heartbeat from theirs. The staircase moaned under its own weight. Steps lifted, barely visible, then fell. I could feel the air moving differently on each landing. The walls seemed to lean inward, curious, patient, watching. I reached the living room. The pale light stretched across the floorboards, trembling against the pulsating shadows. I rested my hand on the wall again. It shifted slowly, deliberately, like it was breathing in response to me. And I drew my hand back. I backed toward the door. The hallway exhaled with me, then pulled itself tight, as though disappointed I was leaving. Outside, the garden was still. Sunlight lay like a pale veil on the grass. But the house behind me, it pulsed. It waited. It breathed, still, softly, patiently, and I knew it would not forget the rhythm of my footsteps. I closed the door. The air fell silent. But the walls still breathed. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, carrying the sharp smell of wet leaves. It was late, later than I usually stayed awake. Then the phone rang. A single, shrill note cutting through the stillness. I froze. The line was empty when I picked up. No words, just breathing. Soft, slow. It moved. Through the wires, I felt it, a presence curling around the edges of my mind. Cold against my neck, that I pressed the phone closer. The hum of electricity in the walls seemed louder now, a rhythm, like soft footsteps, pacing just beyond the door. That I whispered, "Hello." Nothing, only the quiet shift of air and a low, stifled rustle from the receiver. My fingers trembled. The weight of the silence pressed into my chest. I could hear it, tiny movements, sliding along the plastic cord, bending through the metal. The light above flickered, pale and hesitant. Shadows twisted across the ceiling like smoke, thin and slow. I wanted to hang up, to end it, but curiosity kept my hand frozen without a soft exhale. Closer, behind my ear, inside my ear, static curled around it. The line vibrated gently in my palm, as if it were alive, breathing along with me, waiting that I could feel it moving through the wires, shivering along the walls, tracing the corners of the room, I stepped back. The floorboards murmured under my weight. The house seemed to sigh in reply. Another exhale, shallower this time. Almost a whisper, but not quite. I imagined shapes forming in the shadows, delicate and shifting, waiting. The ringing stopped suddenly. No warning. Just gone. I lowered the phone. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. I could still feel the absence of it, lingering in the lines and circuits. Like a breath I couldn't catch as I sat down, stiff against the cold wood of the chair. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust. Every tiny creak of the house echoed in my skull that I wanted to speak, to hear a response. But the room swallowed my voice. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded distant, hollowed. I imagined it there, slipping along the wires, curling through the walls, waiting for the next ring. Soft, persistent. The phone lay quiet in my hand. Pale light pooled across its smooth surface. I couldn't tell if it was a device holding the presence or if I had carried it there myself. That I finally hung up, click, and the room exhaled with me. The weight lifted, but the memory remained, pressed into my skin. Soft footsteps. I thought I heard them receding. Or was it just the wind coaxing shadows to dance? I stayed there alone. The phone dark, my hand still trembling. The silence heavier than the ringing had been. I tried to breathe, tried to let it go, but I could still feel it, a presence slipping along the edges of the wires, quietly waiting for the next call. The lake is quiet tonight. The fog drifts low, curling over the water like smoke from a forgotten fire. I can barely see the dock beneath my feet, the wood slick with mist. And then it appears, a lantern, soft light, pale and steady, trembling ever so slightly as if breathing. It floats there at the very edge, where the water laps in hushed rhythms. I stop. A shiver runs along my spine, cold, yet strange, warm in its own way. The air smells of damp earth, of reeds, of something old and familiar. I want to move closer, but a part of me is afraid of where it might lead. The fog swallows the lake behind it. Everything else disappears. The world narrows to this pale glow, this quiet pool. I step forward. My foot hits wet wood. A soft groan echoes beneath me. The lantern flickers. For a moment, it seems to recognize me, as though it's been waiting. I think about all the nights I've spent here, chasing shadows and whispers, all the shapes that disappeared into the dark, never to return. And now this, light, steady, and certain. It doesn't demand, it doesn't frighten. It simply waits. The fog moves differently tonight. It coils around my legs, tickling my skin, brushing against my cheeks. I feel its weight and its softness at the same time. There's a hum in the air, low and deep, vibrating through my chest. I can almost hear it sigh. The lantern seems closer now, just a few steps away. I reach my hand toward it. The light warms my fingers before they even touch. And then the lake answers with a soft ripple, a breath across the water, like it's aware of my hesitation. I want to ask it where it will take me, but the words catch in my throat. The silence feels honest. I don't need answers tonight. A single ripple expands across the dock. It moves slow, deliberate, as if measuring my heartbeats. I let my hand hover above the lantern. I want to pull away, but the urge to lean in is stronger. The fog hides the world behind it. I can no longer see the trees, the distant shoreline, the sky above, only the pale circle of light, steady and inviting. It feels like hope, like memory, like a last thing to hold before letting go. I step closer. The wood creaks softly, a reminder that I am still here, still grounded. The water waits, dark and patient beneath the lantern. I can smell it now. The lake, deep and secret, hiding things that never surface. The lantern sways slightly. I almost think I see shapes in its glow. Faint silhouettes, familiar faces, things I've lost along the way. But when I blink, they vanish. Only the light remains. I kneel at the edge. The mist curls around my knees, soaking through my pants. My fingers brush the water's edge. It's cold, welcoming, a mirror to the sky swallowed by fog. And in that moment, I understand. The lantern isn't a way out. It's not escape. It's acknowledgement. It's the last thing that waits for you, soft and patient, before the lake folds you into itself. I lean closer. The glow touches my face. Warm, gentle, certain. The water ripples again. Small waves brushing my hands, my knees. I breathe in, and the air tastes of moss, of wet wood, of quiet endings. For a long while, I stay there, watching the lantern sway. I want to reach for it fully, to step into the glow, into the silence that follows. The fog stretches around me, thick and soft, and I let it hold me. Time dissolves. Only light, fog, water, and the soften beneath the lake. The lantern waits. I don't step back. I don't resist. And finally, I understand. Some things are not meant to be fought, not meant to be held, only watched. The lantern is not mine to claim. It is the last thing you see before letting the lake have you. I rest my hands on the dock. The light glows against my skin. The fog hums around me, and in its quiet, I find peace. The lantern flickers once, softly, and the lake swallows everything else. The bathroom light flickered. I sat on the edge of the tub. The mirror above the sink was quiet, too quiet. At first, I thought I imagined it, a movement just behind me in the glass. I was still sitting. The reflection was standing. It mimicked me almost, but the arms swung slower. The head turned too late. Every motion wrong, delayed, as if learning my body anew. I froze. The air smelled faintly of bleach and old water. The reflection smiled. I hadn't. Since then, I started avoiding mirrors. The hallway mirrors. The bathroom mirrors. Even the faint reflection in the window at night. I thought if I didn't look, it couldn't follow. But it did. In the kitchen, my own reflection lingered in the black fridge door. I stepped back. It stepped forward just a moment later. Not together. Never together. Sometimes it stayed still, like a shadow that forgot its own edges. I could hear the soft rustling, almost like breath brushing over the tiles. Not mine. I tried covering every reflective surface. Sheets, taped newspaper. Still glimpses found me. A window catching the moonlight. A polished spoon on the counter. Even the dark screen of my phone. It was always there. Waiting. Watching. Learning. Sleep became strange. I'd wait to find the reflection, sitting behind me in the bed, my own body stiff and silent, the mirror copy, breathing, counting, moving just wrong enough to notice. Once, I caught it in the hall. I hadn't moved from the couch, yet it walked past, a pale light on the floor beneath its feet, dragging shadows behind it. I couldn't call for help. My voice didn't answer. I tried talking to it. I whispered its name. It didn't respond. Just stared, eyes too still, edges too soft, like water under fog. Even in the kitchen, the mirror reflected me walking behind myself. I couldn't escape it. I turned my back to the glass. The reflection didn't. I stopped noticing time. Hours blurred. Days dissolved into half-light and static. The reflection stayed. I tried small tricks, turning lights on and off, blinking rapidly, holding my breath. It learned too quickly, always catching up, always delayed by a second or a breath, always wrong, but always there. I remember a night I woke to my reflection sitting on the stairs, the pail wood under its feet, faint dust in the air. I hadn't moved. The house was silent. I whispered, maybe begging. The reflection tilted its head. Then it followed me, slowly down the hall, step by step. I began to avoid rooms entirely. I would pass doors, feel its gaze pressing through the cracks. The air felt thick, sticky, breathless, and sometimes I thought I could hear the soft click of its shoes. Windows became dangerous. Sunlight bouncing on glass could catch its face. I covered everything with cloth, even the hallway mirrors. Even then, in the kitchen, in the dark, I catch it staring back, learning again, just wrong enough to feel not right. Last night, I sat in my room, lights off. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The mirror at the far wall stayed dark. I thought maybe I had won. Then it appeared behind me, not in the mirror, not in the reflection of anything. Just there, the wrong movements of familiar shape, swaying, waiting, breath brushing my neck, that I close my eyes. Maybe if I don't see it, it can't see me. Maybe if I pretend, it will disappear. The mirror in the hallway flickered faintly in the dark. A shadow moved behind my own. Slow, wrong, delayed, that I am still sitting. It is walking behind me. And it waits. The fog lay thick over the water, pale and restless. I sat on the damp earth, legs tucked close, feeling the chill seep through my jeans. The house behind me was still, empty, silent. The forest leaned in, its shadowed arms pressing around the clearing. Every rustle of leaves felt deliberate, like fingers brushing the edge of my mind. I breathed slowly. The fog smelled of wet pine and something older, something patient. The lake's surface shimmered, pale light reflecting uneven ripples. Shapes moved beneath it, just beneath. I couldn't see clearly, but I could feel them. They shifted with the water, slow, deliberate whispering. I closed my eyes. The soft wrapped around my chest, hollow and warm at the same time. It wasn't loud, but it was there, constant, persistent. The fog rolled closer. It carried a taste of cold metal, wet and heavy on my tongue. A shadow stretched across the lake, darker than the mist, drifting against the current. I swallowed, heart steady. I didn't want to look, but I did anyway. The shape slid closer to the shore, always beneath the surface, yet always aware of me. A flicker of movement, silver and black, caught in the fog. It vanished before I could name it. I stayed still. The forest hummed quietly. Every branch, every leaf seemed to lean toward the water. The air pressed against my skin, damp and alive. I felt my own breath, shallow, visible in the mist. Something shifted beneath the water again. It left ripples that smelled faintly of earth, of mud turned over. I reached out a hand, fingertips grazing the cool surface. The water pulsed beneath my touch. Not like a fish, not like a stone, like it knew me. Soft footsteps, or maybe just a memory of them, ran across the edge of my mind. I didn't move. I didn't want to. The lake was patient. I was patient. I thought of leaving, but the pull kept me seated, rooted to the damp soil. Shapes moved beneath the surface, whispering without words. I felt their cold hum against my chest. A quiet belonging, strange and tender. The fog thickened. My hands disappeared beneath it. I could barely see the opposite shore, only a pale suggestion of trees, of shadows leaning. The lake sighed, soft, long, a breath too big for one body. I leaned closer to the water. The hum grew. It wasn't sound exactly. It vibrated through my bones, settled in the small hollow behind my eyes. The shapes shifted again, slow and deliberate, almost playful. I imagined them circling me, beneath me, through me. I closed my eyes and felt the chill melt into warmth. The fog wrapped around my shoulders. The damp earth pressed against my back. Alone, and yet not alone. The lake held me. Something brushed my ankle beneath the water. Soft, wet, intentional. I froze, breath caught between curiosity and fear. The hum softened, encouraging, endless. The forest leaned even closer, watching, listening. Branches trembled above. Leaves whispered secrets to the fog. The lake pulled at me. Its presence was gentle, patient, absolute. I could have stayed there forever. A shadow rose briefly in the mist. It didn't move toward me. It didn't need to. I felt it in the stillness, in the hum, in the way the water shifted beneath my fingers. I wanted to speak, but my voice was a distant memory. Only the fog and the water answered me. Only the soft pulse of shapes beneath the surface. I let my eyes drift closed again. Time thinned. Moments stretched into one long, quiet thread. The lake, the fog, the forest, the shapes, they were patient. I was patient. I felt part of it, part of the hum, part of the pull, part of the quiet rhythm of the lake and fog. And yet, utterly, impossibly alone. A soft ripple brushed the shore. The mist clung to my skin, cold and warm at once. The forest held its breath. I let my hand rest in the water. It pulsed beneath my palm, soft and unyielding. The hum wrapped around me like a lullaby. I let it. The shapes beneath the surface shifted one last time. A pale light caught the edge of their movement. Then they were gone, or maybe I stopped noticing. I breathed in the fog. I exhaled into the silence. And I stayed.